Picture this: a wind-swept coastline where dragon-prowed longships once sliced through the waves, their crews stepping onto foreign shores with a mix of curiosity and unshakable confidence. The Vikings didn't just raid and conquer, they built, traded, and wove their stories into the very fabric of the lands they touched. And today, if you know where to look, you can still walk the same streets they did, touch the same stones they laid, and feel the echoes of their world in ours. These aren't just ruins or museum pieces, they're living chapters of history, places where the past refuses to fade. From the cobbled lanes of ancient trade towns to the silent strength of hilltop fortresses, the Viking Age lives on in these settlements, each one a testament to their ingenuity, ambition, and far-reaching influence. What if I told you that some of the most vibrant cities in Europe today owe their very existence to Viking settlers, or that hidden in plain sight, nestled between modern buildings, are traces of a Norse legacy that shaped kingdoms? This isn't just about sagas and swords, it's about real people who left behind more than just legends. They left homes, harbors, and halls that still stand centuries later, whispering secrets to those who listen. These sites aren't frozen in time, they evolved, adapted, and became part of the world we know now. And that's what makes them so extraordinary. They're not just relics of a bygone era, they're proof of how deeply the Vikings connected the world, long before globalization was even a concept. So let's set sail on a journey across centuries and continents to uncover the 20 most influential Viking settlements that still exist today. We'll explore how a fearsome warrior culture became master builders and savvy diplomats, leaving behind not just scars but thriving communities. You'll discover how a remote outpost in the North Atlantic grew into a capital city, how a humble trading post became the heart of a medieval empire, and how the echoes of Norse footsteps can still be heard in the languages, laws, and landscapes of these places. This isn't just a tour of ancient sites, it's a chance to walk in the footsteps of history, to see the Viking world not as it's often portrayed, but as it truly was, complex, enduring, and astonishingly alive. Ready to uncover the stories hidden in these stones? Let's begin. Dublin's story begins where the River Liffey meets the Irish Sea, a perfect harbor for Viking ships seeking shelter and opportunity. When Norse warriors first rode into these waters in the 9th century, they didn't just see a place to raid, they saw a crossroads. Within decades, what started as a seasonal camp of tents and makeshift docks grew into Dublin, a bustling hub of trade and craftsmanship. Imagine the dockside chaos, merchants haggling over amber and silver, shipwrights shaping oak into sleek longships, and captives from as far as Spain and North Africa traded in a market that made Dublin infamous. But the Vikings didn't just take, they built. They laid out streets like Fishumble Street, which still follows the same path today, and fortified the settlement with earthen walls that whispered of both power and permanence. The real magic of Dublin's Viking legacy lies beneath your feet. In the 1970s, construction workers near Wood Quay stumbled upon a time capsule, thousands of artifacts preserved in the muddy banks, combs carved from antler, delicate scales for weighing silver, even children's toys. These weren't just treasures, they were everyday proof of a community that planted roots. And then there's Christ Church Cathedral, standing on ground where Norse converts once worshipped Thor and Odin before embracing Christianity. This blending of faiths and cultures wasn't accidental. The Vikings here weren't just conquerors, they became neighbors, intermarrying with the Irish, adopting Gaelic customs, and shaping a hybrid identity that would define the city for centuries. What's astonishing is how Dublin's Norse past refuses to be relegated to history books. Walk into the National Museum, and you'll face the snarling visage of a Viking helmet. Not the horned caricature of Hollywood, but the real thing. Or join the crowds at the annual Viking festival, where reenactors breathe life into the clang of forging swords and the scent of smoked fish. This isn't just nostalgia, it's a living dialogue between past and present. Because the Vikings didn't just leave Dublin, they became Dublin, weaving their DNA into the city's streets, its language, and even its stubborn, spirited soul. From raiders to rulers to ordinary people mending nets by the river, their story is a reminder that history isn't about endings, it's about transformation. If Dublin showed us how Vikings became city builders, York reveals how they turned conquest into a cultural revolution. Picture the River Ouse winding through the heart of England's north, its waters carrying ships loaded with furs from Norway, glass from the Rhineland, and coins minted with the names of Norse kings. This was Jorvik, not just a settlement, but the pulsating capital of a Viking kingdom that stretched across northern England. When archaeologists peeled back the layers beneath Coppergate in the 1970s, they didn't just find artifacts, they uncovered an entire world frozen in time. A shoemaker's last, still shaped by the grip of hands 1,000 years gone. Pits filled with fish bones and fruit seeds, telling silent stories of Viking feasts. Even the faint imprint of a cat's paw in dried clay, a fleeting moment preserved like a whisper. What makes York extraordinary isn't just the scale of its Viking heritage, it's the intimacy. Step into the Jorvik Viking Center, and you're not just observing history, you're engulfed by it. The creak of wooden planks underfoot, the tang of smoked meat in the air, the loom weights spinning in a weaver's workshop, every detail meticulously reconstructed from those Coppergate finds. Here, you'll meet the faces of York's Norse past literally. Forensic reconstructions of skeletons reveal a population as diverse as their trade routes, with ancestry from Scandinavia, Scotland, and even the Mediterranean. This was no isolated outpost. It was a crossroads where a Viking woman might barter with an Anglo-Saxon merchant for Frankish wine, while a Norse poet recited sagas in the shadow of a church built atop a pagan shrine. But York's Viking legacy isn't confined to museums. Walk the shambles and you're tracing a street pattern laid out by Norse town planners. Listen closely and you'll catch echoes of Old Norse in local dialect, words like fell for hill or kirk for church, linguistic fossils from the Danelaw. Even York Minster, that Gothic masterpiece, stands where Viking rulers once held court, their great hall so renowned that medieval chroniclers called it the wonder of the North. The Vikings didn't just leave footprints here, they laid foundations both literal and cultural that would shape England for centuries. From the bloodied battlefield of Stamford Bridge to the quiet persistence of Norse place names, York is proof that the most enduring conquests aren't made by swords alone, but by the slow, stubborn weaving of lives into the land itself. Ribe doesn't just whisper of Viking history, it shouts. Nestled in the marshes of western Denmark, this unassuming town holds a staggering title, the oldest urban center in all of Scandinavia. Long before the likes of Copenhagen or Oslo rose to prominence, Ribe's dirt streets were already thrumming with activity by the early 8th century. Picture the scene, traders from as far as Baghdad haggling over silver dirhams, Frisian merchants unloading bolts of fine cloth, and Norse craftsmen hammering out intricate brooches in workshops that would one day be unearthed by astonished archaeologists. This wasn't some remote outpost, it was a cosmopolitan hub where the Viking world connected with the wider medieval economy. What makes Ribe extraordinary isn't just its age, it's the astonishing preservation of its daily life. Excavations here have yielded treasures that feel almost intimate. A delicate glass bead rolled under a wooden floor, lost by its owner 1,200 years ago. The charred remains of a loaf of bread, baked in an oven that still bears the soot marks of its last fire. Even the outline of a Viking marketplace, its stalls laid out with mathematical precision, proving this was no haphazard camp but a carefully planned town. These finds reveal something revolutionary. The Vikings weren't just raiders and explorers. By Ribe's heyday, they were urbanites, building societies as complex as any in Europe. Step into the Ribe Viking Center today, and you'll find history isn't locked behind glass. It's something you can touch, smell, and even taste. Blacksmiths demonstrate how pattern-welded swords were forged, their hammers ringing against anvils just as they did when Charlemagne ruled the Franks. Brewers stir vats of mead using recipes scratched onto rune stones, while artisans carve antler into combs with the same geometric designs found in graves from Russia to Ireland. This living history isn't just for show, it's a testament to Ribe's role as a cultural incubator. The techniques perfected here, shipbuilding, metalwork, textile production, spread like wildfire across the Norse world, carried by traders and settlers who passed through its bustling streets. But perhaps Ribe's greatest legacy is how it shatters stereotypes. The town's layers of artifacts, Christian crosses mingled with Thor's hammers, Arabic silver alongside Celtic bronze, paint a picture of a society far more nuanced than the horned helmet caricature. Here, pagan and Christian neighbors shared meals, while foreign merchants bartered peacefully under laws that would later inspire medieval legal codes. Ribe proves the Vikings weren't just agents of destruction, they were builders of civilization, laying the groundwork for the Scandinavia we know today. From its humble beginnings as a riverside trading post to its current status as a portal to the past, Ribe stands as a reminder that the most enduring history isn't written in stone, but in the lived experiences of ordinary people. Hedeby wasn't just a trading post, it was the beating heart of Viking commerce, a place where continents collided. Tucked between the Schlei Inlet and a protective semicircle of earthworks, this settlement thrived as Scandinavia's gateway to the world. Imagine docks stacked with crates of amber from the Baltic, bales of Flemish wool, and sleek Russian furs, all under the watchful eyes of Norse merchants who spoke half a dozen languages. The ground here still yields treasures that tell a global story: fragments of silk from Constantinople, a bronze Buddha figurine likely hauled across the Silk Road, and coins stamped with the names of caliphs from Baghdad. This wasn't just trade, it was cultural alchemy, transforming Hedeby into a microcosm of the medieval world. What set Hedeby apart was its sheer ingenuity. The town's layout reveals a mastery of urban planning rare for its time. Streets paved with wooden planks to combat mud, warehouses raised on stilts to avoid flooding, and a sophisticated system of canals linking the settlement to both sea and hinterland, every detail engineered for efficiency. Archaeologists even uncovered a shipwright's yard where vessels were built to suit different routes: slender longships for raiding, sturdy knars for Atlantic crossings, and flat-bottomed barges for river trade. This adaptability made Hedeby the Vikings' commercial command center, a place where a trader from Greenland could barter walrus ivory with a Saxon blacksmith, while a Swedish arms dealer inspected Frankish swords nearby. But Hedeby's story isn't just one of prosperity. The charred timbers and arrowheads unearthed near its ramparts whisper of a darker chapter. In the 11th century, waves of raids, first by Slavic tribes, then by Norwegian King Harald Hardrada, reduced this bustling metropolis to smoldering ruins. Yet even in decline, Hedeby left an indelible mark. The techniques pioneered here standardized weights and measures, toll systems. Even early forms of trade agreements became blueprints for medieval ports from London to Novgorod. Today, walking among the reconstructed thatch-roofed houses at Hedeby Museum, you can almost hear the clamor of negotiations in a dozen tongues, smell the tar bubbling in shipyards, and sense the restless energy of a place that once tied together worlds. Heddeby's legacy isn't just in its artifacts, but in proving that the Vikings didn't just take, they transformed, connected, and built bridges between civilizations. For all its global reach, Heddeby's true genius lay in the ordinary. The discovery of a child's wooden toy horse near the marketplace, or the remains of a communal bread oven where neighbors shared loaves, reminds us that history isn't just about kings and battles. It's about the rhythm of daily life in a town where a Norse housewife might cook with spices from India, while her husband mended a fishing net using techniques borrowed from the Sami people. This interplay of the local and the global, the mundane and the extraordinary, is what makes Hedeby such a powerful lens into the Viking Age. It wasn't just a hub of goods, but of ideas where the Norse worldview stretched far beyond the fjords to embrace an astonishingly interconnected medieval universe. Birka rises from Lake Melleran like a time capsule, its grassy mounds hiding stories of a time when this island buzzed with merchants speaking languages from across the known world. Founded in the mid-8th century, this wasn't just a settlement, it was Sweden's answer to the great trading hubs of the Mediterranean. Picture the dockside chaos, Saxon traders unloading barrels of honey, Finnish hunters offering bundles of rare furs, and Rus merchants from the Volga displaying intricate silver jewelry that shimmered under the Nordic sun. But what truly set Birka apart was its role as a cultural sieve, where ideas from Constantinople to the Baltic fused into something distinctly Viking. The graves here tell a silent epic. When archaeologists unearthed the burial of a wealthy woman, they found her adorned with a cloak of Byzantine silk so finely woven it still gleamed after 12 centuries. Nearby, a warrior's grave yielded a sword with a blade forged in the Frankish Empire, its hilt inlaid with garnets from India. These weren't just status symbols, they were proof of a network stretching thousands of miles. Even more telling were the tiny glass weights used to measure Arabic silver dirhams, so common in Birka's soil that historians realized this was essentially the Viking Age equivalent of a currency exchange hub. Today, wandering Birka's windswept paths feels like stepping into a living saga. The reconstructed blacksmith's forge isn't just a display. Artisans still hammer out replica brooches using 8th century techniques, the scent of burning coal mingling with the lake breeze. Down at the waterfront, visitors can grip the oar of a reconstructed longship, feeling the same strain in their shoulders that Norse traders once did while rowing toward the island's protective palisades. It's these tactile experiences that reveal Birka's true genius, its ability to balance defense and openness. The settlement's strategic position allowed it to control trade routes while welcoming outsiders, a duality etched into its very geography. What cements Birka's UNESCO status isn't just its artifacts, but its role as a social laboratory. Runestones near the harbor bear messages from Christian missionaries, while amulets of Thor's hammer found in workshops speak to lingering pagan beliefs. This spiritual crossroads mirrors the town's physical one, where Eastern silver met Western iron, and Nordic pragmatism blended with Slavic artistry. Modern replicas of Birka's wharves and homes don't just recreate the past, they highlight how the Vikings turned this island into a blueprint for urban life in Scandinavia. From its meticulously planned grid of streets to its multicultural graves, Birka proves that the Viking world wasn't just vast, it was vibrantly interconnected, a place where a trader could breakfast on Caspian fish, barter with a Sami reindeer herder by noon, and dine on Frankish wine as the northern lights danced overhead. Copang's story begins with a paradox, a bustling Viking town with no walls, no ramparts, not even a defensive ditch. Nestled along Norway's Viksfjord, this 8th century trading hub thrived not through force but through sheer commercial magnetism. Picture a shoreline alive with activity, Frisian merchants haggling over rolls of English wool, Norse craftsmen shaping antler into intricate combs, and Arab silver coins changing hands under the summer midnight sun. This wasn't a military stronghold. It was Scandinavia's answer to a medieval free trade zone where safety came not from swords, but from the mutual interest of everyone who profited here. The artifacts pulled from Copang's soil tell a tale of astonishing connections. Excavations revealed glass drinking horns from the Rhineland, ceramic shards from Denmark, and even a fragment of a Carolingian bronze scale, proof that commerce here ran on precision, not plunder. Most revealing are the hundreds of tiny weights used to measure precious metals, some small as a fingernail, each one evidence of a sophisticated economy where trust was the real currency. Unlike heavily fortified sites like Hedeby, Copang's vulnerability was its strength. The absence of defenses signaled to traders that this was neutral ground, a place where disputes were settled with scales rather than spears. What truly sets Copang apart is the intimacy of its ruins. Archaeologists uncovered a shoemaker's workshop with leather scraps still bearing needle holes, as if the cobbler had just stepped away. Nearby, the remains of a fish-drying rack stood where it collapsed centuries ago, its wooden posts leaning like weary sentinels. These aren't just relics, they're frozen moments from a Viking workday, revealing a community of artisans, fishermen, and merchants who called this place home year-round. The discovery of winter storage pits and sturdy permanent houses shattered the old notion that Viking trade centers were seasonal camps. Copang's people planted roots. Today, the Midgard Viking Center brings this open-air marketplace back to life. Visitors can grip a replica of an ancient blacksmith's tongs, feeling the heft of tools that shaped history, or try their hand at weaving on a loom identical to those found in the digs. The center's crowning jewel, a full-scale reconstruction of the Gokstad ship, its oars poised as if ready to carry Copang's wares to distant ports. These experiences do more than educate, they dissolve the myth of Vikings as mindless marauders. Here, you're not standing on a battlefield, but in the workshop of a master jeweler or the kitchen of a Norse family who flavored their stews with imported peppercorns. Copang's legacy lingers in the unlikeliest places. Modern Norwegian words like Copang, meaning market, and handel, trade, echo its mercantile spirit, while the very idea of peaceful commerce as a cultural force finds early roots here. This settlement didn't just trade goods, it traded ideas, proving that the Viking world had as much room for merchants as it did for warriors. In a time when Scandinavia is often reduced to horned helmets and battle axes, Copang whispers a different truth, that the most enduring conquests sometimes come not from the edge of a sword, but from the open palm of a deal well struck. Trelleborg isn't just a fortress, it's a geometric marvel carved into the Danish landscape, a perfect circle of earth and timber that defies the chaos often associated with the Viking Age. Built by King Harald Bluetooth in the late 10th century, this stronghold wasn't some haphazard pile of logs. It was a masterclass in military precision. Picture a vast, symmetrical ring, its ramparts rising like the rim of a giant shield, with 4 roads slicing through the interior like axes on a compass. Every measurement here was deliberate, the diameter of the outer wall exactly 295 feet, the barracks arranged in neat quadrants, each one a mirror image of the next. This wasn't just brute strength, it was architecture as propaganda, a physical declaration that the Norse could command order as fiercely as they wielded swords. Beneath the grassy mounds lies evidence of a society far more organized than history often credits them for. Excavations uncovered rows of identical longhouses, each one a standardized 30 meters long, their curved walls echoing the shape of overturned ships. These weren't just shelters, they were soldiers' quarters designed for efficiency, with central hearths and raised sleeping platforms that could house an army. Outside the walls, archaeologists found the remains of a sprawling shipyard and smithies where blacksmiths mass-produced weapons, not the work of scattered raiders, but of a kingdom with industrial-scale ambitions. Most haunting of all, a nearby burial mound cradling the skeleton of a young warrior, his shield boss still clasped in skeletal fingers, a silent sentinel to Trelleborg's martial heartbeat. What truly brings this fortress to life is the reconstruction at Trelleborg Museum. Visitors don't just see history, they feel it. The creak of wooden gates swinging open, the scent of forge fires melting iron ore into nails, the heft of a replica spear balanced in the palm. These sensory details dissolve centuries in an instant. Stand in the center of that great circle, and you'll understand the psychological power of its design. Every angle funnels the eye inward, reinforcing the message that authority radiated from a single point. Harald himself, the king who united Denmark and Norway under his rule, and whose name now graces Bluetooth technology as a nod to his legacy of connection. But Trelleborg's genius isn't just in its walls, it's in the questions it forces us to ask. Why build such geometric perfection in an era we often paint as lawless? The answer lies in the artifact's standardized weights for toll collection, uniform coins minted with Harald's cross, even the remains of a wooden road stretching toward neighboring fortresses. This was a node in a network, part of a system designed to control trade routes and crush rebellion. The Vikings didn't just conquer lands, they engineered loyalty, using architecture as both sword and shield. Today, as children clamber over the reconstructed ramparts or try their hand at archery with bows modeled on historical finds, Trelleborg whispers a truth often drowned out by sagas of bloodshed, that the Norse didn't just leave ruins. They left blueprints for empire. Elands Meadows sprawls across Newfoundland's wind-swept northern tip like a page torn from a saga, a cluster of low, grassy mounds that once cradled the first European houses in North America. When Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad and his archaeologist wife Anne Stein identified this site in the 1960s, they didn't just find ruins, they unearthed a paradigm shift. Here, beneath layers of peat and lupine flowers, lay iron nails forged in Norse furnaces, a bronze cloak pin etched with Viking designs, and the unmistakable outline of a turf-walled longhouse. These weren't stray artifacts washed ashore. They were proof positive that Leif Erikson and his crew had walked this coastline 5 centuries before Columbus even set sail. What makes Elands Meadows extraordinary isn't just its existence, it's the intimate details frozen in time. The settlement's 3 dwellings and workshops were positioned with strategic precision, their doorways facing south to capture sunlight while blocking Arctic winds. Archaeologists found a stone anvil where smiths repaired ship's rivets, wood shavings from boat maintenance, and even butter, nutshells, evidence of expeditions farther south where this tree species grew. These weren't the remains of a shipwrecked crew. They spoke of deliberate, repeated voyages across the treacherous North Atlantic. The Vikings called this place Vinland, and though their stay lasted perhaps a decade, their footprint altered history's timeline forever. Walking among the reconstructed sod houses today, you can almost hear the echoes of that fateful encounter between Norse explorers and the indigenous Beothuk people. The sagas describe tense trades, Then violent clashes, a pattern that would tragically repeat itself centuries later. Yet Elance Ork's Meadows also hints at quieter moments, the glow of a forge illuminating a smith's face as he hammered iron, the scent of seaweed and spruce smoke mingling in the salty air, the bewildering sight of grapes growing wild in a land utterly unlike Greenland or Iceland. This was the edge of the known world, a place where Viking pragmatism met sheer wonder. UNESCO recognition of the site in 1978 cemented its status as a cultural touchstone, but the real magic lies in its living history program. Costumed interpreters demonstrate Norse textile weaving on upright looms, their hands moving just as those of Gudrid Thorbjornadottir might have when this pregnant explorer allegedly gave birth here, the first European child born in the New World. Nearby, visitors can heft a replica Viking axe or help turn a grindstone to sharpen iron tools, tactile connections to a fleeting but pivotal chapter. The surrounding landscape hasn't changed much since the 11th century. The same frigid waves crash against the rocks, the same stunted trees bend under winter winds. Standing here, you're not just learning history, you're standing at the precipice of two worlds colliding, where Norse courage and indigenous resilience wrote a prologue to a story that would reshape continents. Elance Ork's Meadows' greatest lesson might be its impermanence. The Vikings abandoned it not due to failure, but because maintaining transatlantic supply lines proved unsustainable. Yet in that brief window, they achieved what others only dreamed of, bridging the old world and the new with nothing but wooden ships and starlit navigation. Today, as archaeologists scour nearby islands for undiscovered Norse sites, this lonely outpost remains a powerful symbol, proof that history's most transformative moments often begin not with fanfare, but with the quiet creak of a longship's oars cutting through pre-dawn mist. Roskilde's story begins where the fjord narrows, a strategic pinch point where King Harald Bluetooth himself decided to plant the roots of Danish power. This wasn't just another Viking settlement, it was a royal statement carved into the landscape. Imagine the scene in the 10th century, longships gliding into the sheltered harbor, their prows brushing against the same waters where 5 of those very vessels would later be deliberately sunk, a nautical barricade to shield the fledgling kingdom from seaborne threats. Those ships, now resurrected in the Roskilde Viking Ship Museum, aren't just exhibits, they're time machines. Their hulls bear the scars of ocean crossings, their oak planks still showing the precise marks of axes wielded by master shipwrights. One, the Skulderlev II, stretches nearly 100 feet, a warship capable of carrying 80 warriors, its design so flawless it could slice through waves at 15 knots. What makes Roskilde extraordinary isn't just its royal pedigree, but how it bridges the sacred and the seafaring. The same fjord that birthed those legendary ships also led to the doorstep of Roskilde Cathedral, where Viking kings transformed into Christian monarchs beneath its Gothic arches. This duality pulses through the city, pagan ship burials unearthed near Christian graveyards, rune stones inscribed with both Thor's hammer and the cross. Even the annual Viking market embodies this fusion, where blacksmiths demonstrating 9th century techniques share the field with reenactors staging mock baptisms, a living tableau of Scandinavia's spiritual evolution. Step inside the Viking Ship Museum's boatyard, and history isn't just observed, it's built. Craftsmen here use medieval tools to reconstruct longships from original blueprints, their hands blistered from shaping timber with nothing but adzes and chisels. Visitors can watch as iron rivets are heated and hammered into planks, the same method that produced vessels sturdy enough to weather North Atlantic gales yet light enough to portage across rivers. This isn't hypothetical archaeology, it's experimental history at its finest. When the museum's replica of the Sea Stallion sailed from Roskilde to Dublin in 2007, It proved Viking engineering could still conquer the seas a millennium later. Beyond the docks, Roskilde whispers its Norse legacy in subtler ways. The curve of Storgate Street follows the original Viking Age shoreline, while beneath the modern train station lie the remains of Harald's Royal Hall, its post holes tracing the outline of a building that once hosted feasts described in sagas. Local breweries even resurrect ancient mead recipes using honey from hives placed where Norse apiaries once stood. This isn't a city frozen in time. It's a place where the past is continually rewoven into the present, proving that Viking ingenuity wasn't just about conquest, but about creating foundations that would endure long after the longships rotted away. From the echoing halls of its UNESCO-listed cathedral to the salt-stained timbers of its resurrected fleet, Roskilde stands as a testament to the Vikings' greatest triumph, not just reaching distant shores, but anchoring their culture so deeply it could never be washed away. Sigtuna emerges from the Swedish landscape like a living parchment, its rune-inscribed stones whispering secrets from the twilight of the Viking Age. Founded around 970 by King Eric the Victorious, this wasn't just another settlement, it was a bold experiment in reinvention. Picture a town where newly baptized Norse merchants walked past wooden stave churches on their way to trade with pagan partners from the Baltic, their pockets jingling with silver coins stamped with Christian crosses. The very streets here double as open-air museums lined with over 150 rune stones, more per square mile than anywhere else on Earth. These aren't just markers, they're social media posts from the 11th century, broadcasting everything from inheritance disputes to poetic laments like the one near Storegaten Street. Torsten raised this stone for his brother Sigvid, no man shall seek vengeance. Beneath Sigtuna's cobblestones lies evidence of a cultural tightrope walk. Archaeologists have uncovered Thor's hammer amulets in Christian graves, Arabic silver in mintmasters' workshops, and even a woman's grave containing both a cross and traditional Norse oval brooches. This duality wasn't accidental. The town's layout itself reveals careful planning, a main street precisely aligned with ancient ley lines, flanked by properties of equal width to prevent feuds over land. At the Sigtuna Museum, you can trace this evolution through artifacts like the town's first minted coins, imitated from English designs but bearing the name of Olof Skirtkonung, the king who made Christianity Sweden's official religion. The real marvel, these coins circulated alongside hack silver and Arab dirhams, proving old and new economies coexisted for generations. What brings Sigtuna's Viking Christian fusion to life today isn't just its artifacts, but its atmospheric continuity. Wander down the same flagstone path where Norse converts once carried offerings to St. Per's Church, now a romantic ruin draped in ivy. Peer into reconstructed Viking Age workshops where artisans still craft jewelry using thousand-year-old lost wax techniques. Even the local bakery revives recipes from carbonized bread loaves found during excavations, their dense rye dough sweetened with honey, just as it would have been when served to visiting bishops and ruse traders. This isn't a town that turned its back on its pagan roots, it's one that learned to wear its new faith like a cloak over familiar armor. The genius of Sigtuna lies in its contradictions. The same rune stones that proclaim Christian devotion are carved in the swirling urn style, a visual echo of pagan Norse art. The town's strategic position on Lake Mälaren kept it connected to Baltic trade networks even as it became a springboard for missionaries heading inland. Modern visitors can literally touch this legacy. At the Sigtuna Stiftsgård, Sweden's oldest operational building, the cellar walls contain stones salvaged from Viking Age structures. From its hybrid spirituality to its innovative urban planning, Sigtuna stands as proof that the Viking Age didn't end abruptly. It transformed, blending old and new until the seams became invisible. Here, history isn't a series of clean breaks, but a slow, stubborn dance between tradition and change, where the clang of a blacksmith's hammer still sounds remarkably like the rhythm of a forging nation. Orkney's windswept shores tell a story not of conquest, but of seamless fusion, where Norse settlers didn't just occupy these islands north of Scotland, but became part of their very bedrock. The moment you step onto the tidal island of Birka, the political heart of the Viking earldom, the layers of history unfold like pages from the Orkney saga. Here, the ruins of a Norse settlement cling to the cliffs, their stone foundations arranged with geometric precision around a 12th century church. But look closer, those same stones repurpose older Pictish carvings, a silent testament to how Viking rulers absorbed rather than erased the culture of those who came before. The artifacts unearthed here, a delicate bronze balance scale for weighing silver, a gaming piece carved from whalebone, speak of a society that balanced raiding with sophisticated governance, where jarls held court in great halls warmed by central hearths and lit by soapstone lamps flickering with fish oil. Meadows' Neolithic tomb, older than the pyramids, became an unlikely Viking guestbook. During a winter storm in the 12th century, Norse travelers took shelter within its chambered walls and left behind the largest collection of runic graffiti outside Scandinavia. Their carvings range from the boastful, thorny-bedded Helgi, scratches one particularly candid visitor, to the poetic, like the intricate serpentine runes praising a woman's beauty. These aren't mere vandalism, they're snapshots of Viking humor, creativity, and even spirituality. Some inscriptions invoke Christ alongside Thor, revealing the cultural crossroads Orkney had become. The tomb's alignment with the winter solstice, a feature the Norse would have recognized from their own traditions, suggests these newcomers weren't just passing through. They were listening to the land, blending their beliefs with its ancient rhythms. Every July, Orkney's St. Magnus Festival transforms the archipelago into a living saga. Fiddlers play melodies that might have echoed in Jarl Rognvald's court, while blacksmiths demonstrate how Norse craftsmen forged the very hinges of St. Magnus Cathedral, a red sandstone masterpiece founded in 1137, its walls bearing rune like mason marks. The festival's crowning moment comes when locals reenact the saga's most dramatic scenes, from the martyrdom of Magnus Erlendsson to the cunning political maneuvers of his successors. These performances aren't just entertainment, they're acts of preservation, ensuring that the oral traditions of the Viking Age still resonate across Orkney's treeless hills. What makes Orkney's Norse legacy unique is its everyday visibility. At the borough of Birka, low tide reveals a Viking-era causeway, its stones worn smooth by centuries of feet, farmers, monks, and traders who all walked the same path. In farmsteads across the islands, plows still uncover soapstone spindle walls or fragments of Norse chess sets. Even the local dialect carries echoes of Old Norse. Words like kirk for church or air for a gravel beach linger like linguistic fossils. The islands didn't just survive their Viking age, they thrived because of it, becoming a cultural bridge where Norse law, art, and language took root so deeply that when Scottish rule finally came in the 15th century, Orkney's people still spoke a dialect closer to Bergen than Edinburgh. From the dragon-headed prow of the Scar-boat burial to the haunting melodies of the Orkney ballads, these islands don't just preserve Viking history, they continue to breathe it, proving that the most enduring settlements aren't those built on force, but on the slow, stubborn alchemy of adaptation. Reykjavik's origin story reads like something straight from the sagas, a tale of fire, fate, and sheer Norse stubbornness. When Ingolfur Arnarsson tossed his high-seat pillars into the sea in the late 9th century, vowing to settle wherever the gods washed them ashore, he couldn't have known he was founding what would become the world's northernmost capital. That first farmstead, established where steam from hot springs curled into the Arctic air, was modest even by Viking standards. But beneath Reykjavik's modern streets at Athalstriti, the settlement exhibition preserves a stunning time capsule. The excavated remains of a 10th century longhouse, its turf walls still bearing the soot stains of ancient hearth fires. Step inside the museum's glass floor, and you're literally walking above history, the outline of a Viking-era dwelling complete with a smithy's forge, fishing weights, and even a child's toy boat, all whispering of daily life in this windswept outpost. What makes Reykjavik extraordinary isn't just its archaeology, but its living literary legacy. Iceland's sagas, penned centuries later in sheepskin-covered manuscripts, transform these ruins into vivid scenes. The saga of the people of Eyri describes settlers like Ingolfur splitting turf for walls, while Egil's saga captures the smell of whale meat roasting over open fires, details so precise they've guided modern reconstructions. At the Arne Magnusson Institute, visitors can see these medieval texts up close, their rune-like letters preserving not just kings' battles, but intimate moments, a feud over milk cows, a poet's unrequited love, even the screech of ravens following ships to shore. These aren't dry histories, they're narrative time machines offering a glimpse into Viking mindsets no artifact could reveal. Today, Reykjavik wears its Norse heritage with quiet pride. The towering Hallgrímskirkja church echoes the basalt columns of Iceland's volcanic landscape, a modernist nod to the forces that shaped both the land and its settlers' resilience. Down at the harbor, the Viking Maritime Museum showcases replicas of ships that braved the North Atlantic, their hulls tarred with the same pine pitch found on 9th century fragments. Even the city's annual Viking festival feels less like a reenactment and more like a homecoming, where locals sporting historically accurate wool tunics demonstrate everything from saga storytelling to the grueling process of making skyer the old-fashioned way. Yet Reykjavik's true Viking legacy lies in its adaptability. The same geothermal springs that warmed Ingolfur's longhouse now heat 90% of the city's homes, a continuity of resourcefulness spanning 12 centuries. Modern Icelandic, remarkably close to Old Norse, still uses words like skali for house, the very term that would have been spoken within those excavated walls. From farmstead to cosmopolitan capital, Reykjavik embodies the Norse genius for making the improbable habitable, turning a remote island into a cultural stronghold where sagas aren't just studied, but felt in the crunch of volcanic gravel underfoot and the sight of steam rising from the earth, just as it did when the first longship crested the horizon. Bergen rises from Norway's fjords like a living bridge between ages, a city born just after the Viking Age, yet pulsing with the same commercial energy that once fueled Norse longships. Though officially founded in 1070 by King Olav Kyrre, its soul belongs to an older tradition. Walk the iconic Briggen Wharf, where UNESCO-protected wooden warehouses lean against each other like tipsy sailors, and you're tracing the ghostly outline of a Viking trading post. Those iconic pointed gables and stacked timber frames, they're direct descendants of Viking-era construction, a design so resilient it weathered centuries of North Sea storms. Beneath the colorful facades, archaeologists have unearthed artifacts that tell a quieter story. A Norse merchant's scale buried in mud, its bronze pans still balanced as if waiting for the next transaction, or fragments of Arabic coins mingled with walrus ivory, proof that Bergen didn't invent maritime trade, it inherited a Viking playbook and scaled it up. The Hanseatic League may have turned Bergen into a medieval powerhouse, but its blueprint was undeniably Norse. When German merchants arrived in the 13th century, they didn't impose a new system, they plugged into existing networks the Vikings had spun across the North Sea. The city's strategic position, sheltered by 7 hills and facing the open ocean, was already legendary among Norse traders. At the Hanseatic Museum, the echoes are unmistakable. Account books in Low German sit beside older Norse rune sticks recording cargo manifests, while the reek of dried cod, a staple trade good since Viking times, still lingers in the air. This wasn't a break from the past, but an evolution. Even the notorious German wharf was built atop older Norse docks, its foundations literally resting on Viking ambition. What truly cements Bergen's Viking DNA is its shipbuilding legacy. At the Bergen Maritime Museum, the skeleton of a 12th century Gnar, a descendant of Viking cargo ships, reveals how Norse design principles endured. Its clinker-built hull, overlapping planks riveted with iron, is nearly identical to those that crossed the Atlantic centuries earlier. Nearby, a replica of King Sverre's late 12th century warship proves the Viking longship's influence lasted well into the age of castles and crusades. But the most telling detail, the museum's collection of shipwrights' tools from adzes to augers, matches those found in Viking graves across Scandinavia. The hands that shaped Bergen's fleet worked with the same motions, the same materials, even the same sweat-soaked determination as their pagan ancestors. Today, Bergen wears its dual heritage with pride. During the annual Hanseatic Days, actors in medieval garb demonstrate how stockfish was traded pound for pound against German grain, a direct continuation of Viking Age barter systems. Down at the Bergen Foundation's museum, visitors can press their palms against glass covering an excavated Norse-era hearth, its stones still blackened by fires that once warmed traders haggling over reindeer antlers and Russian furs. Even the city's dialect carries traces of Old Norse, with words like kai for wharf or vag for bay surviving from the language of the earliest settlers. Bergen's ultimate lesson is one of continuity. From the Viking chieftains who first exploited its natural harbor to the Hanseatic merchants who turned it into a continental hub, the city thrived by doing what the Norse did best, adapting without erasing. Its cobbled streets may be lined with later medieval buildings, but the rhythm beneath, the crash of waves against pilings, the cry of gulls over fish markets, the creak of ropes tying ship to shore, is as old as the sagas themselves. This isn't just a postscript to the Viking Age. It's proof that their greatest legacy wasn't conquest, but the invisible architecture of trade, trust, and cultural exchange that still underpins our connected world. Faroe Islands rise from the North Atlantic like a chain of emerald stepping stones, each one a testament to Viking navigation and sheer willpower. When Norse settlers first landed here in the early 9th century, they weren't just seeking new pastures, they were mastering the sea's rhythm. The archipelago's very name, Faroe in Faroes, means sheep islands, a nod to the livestock those early explorers brought to tame this wild landscape. At Sandjord on Sandoy Island, archaeologists peeled back layers of peat to uncover something extraordinary: the remains of a Viking-age farmstead, its floor packed with walrus bones, Icelandic pumice, and even shards of glass from the Rhineland. These weren't just random finds. They were proof that even at the edge of the known world, the Faroes served as a bustling crossroads where ships bound for Iceland, Greenland, and beyond would shelter from storms and resupply. The real magic of the Faroes lies in their linguistic time capsule. Modern Faroes remain so close to Old Norse that Icelanders can follow conversations with minimal effort. Place names like Vestmanna, Westman's Bay, and Kirkjuba, Church Farm, read like pages from a Viking map, while everyday words like batter for boat or fjall for mountain echo across centuries virtually unchanged. At the National Museum in Tórshavn, A simple wooden gaming piece carved with Norse runes tells a deeper story. This wasn't just a utilitarian outpost, but a community where settlers carved out moments of leisure amid the relentless Atlantic winds. Even the traditional grass-roofed houses, their sod insulation harking back to Viking longhouse construction, blur the line between past and present. Every July, the Olavsoka festival transforms the islands into a living saga. Faroe's rowing teams compete in wooden boats descended from Viking designs, their oars cutting through fjord waters just as their ancestors did 1,000 years earlier. The air fills with the drone of medieval ballads sung in a style preserved by oral tradition, while locals don elaborately embroidered woolens based on fragments found in Norse-era graves. This isn't just cultural preservation, it's a defiant celebration of identity in a landscape where the sea claws at every shore. At the festival's climax, participants reenact the Viking-era ting, or assembly, demonstrating how democratic traditions planted by Norse settlers still shape Faroe's governance today. What makes the Faroes uniquely compelling is their liminality, the sense of standing at civilization's edge. The ruins of Magnus Cathedral in Kirkjubø, its sandstone walls half swallowed by grass, embody this duality. Built in the 13th century but left unfinished when Norway's royal patronage waned, it stands as both a monument to ambition and a reminder of the island's isolation. Yet in that isolation lies a revelation. Viking society wasn't just about raids and conquests. Here, at the western frontier, it was about adaptation, about people who turned volcanic rock into farmland, who memorized sea currents like others memorize streets, and whose descendants still sing verses that would have been familiar to Leif Erikson. From the navigational cairns dotting mountain passes to the shared ownership of village fishing grounds, a custom dating to Norse land nom laws, the Faroes don't just preserve Viking history. They live it, breathe it, and sail it every day across the same unforgiving waters that once tested their ancestors' resolve. Novgorod's story begins where the Volkhov River meets Lake Ilmen, a strategic crossroads that turned this settlement into the beating heart of the Viking East. To Norse traders and warriors, it was Holmgard, the island fortress, named for the waterlogged terrain that made it impregnable. Step into the Detinets, the city's ancient citadel, and you're walking the same earth where Prince Rurik, a semi-legendary Varangian chieftain, established his rule in the 9th century. His dynasty, the Rurikids, would shape Russia for over 700 years, but the traces of their Norse roots are etched into Novgorod's very stones. Archaeologists have unearthed pendants in the shape of Thor's hammer nestled beside Orthodox crosses, while runic graffiti scratches across church walls. One even boasts of a visitor named Halfdan in angular Norse letters. These aren't just artifacts, they're fragments of a cultural alchemy that fused Viking ambition with Slavic tradition. The real magic lies in Novgorod's birchbark letters, ordinary documents preserved in the waterlogged soil, offering snapshots of daily life. One fragment records a merchant's debt in silver grivnas, a currency system borrowed from Scandinavian weight standards. Another, written by a woman named Anna, disputes property boundaries with her neighbor, proof that Norse legal customs around women's rights took root here. At the Novgorod State Museum, you can see these fragile scrolls alongside Scandinavian-style brooches and Frankish glass, all evidence of a city that served as the northern anchor of the, from the Varangians to the Greeks, trade route. Viking ships laden with Baltic amber and Arctic furs would portage here before sailing south to Constantinople, their hulls eventually returning heavy with Byzantine silk and Arab silver. What sets Novgorod apart is its democratic legacy. The same Vetch bell that summoned Slavic townspeople to assembly likely echoed with Norse-style debate. a tradition of collective governance that endured even as the city became Orthodox Christian. St. Sophia Cathedral, completed in 1050, embodies this blend. Its domes gleam with Slavic gold, but its foundations contain reused Norse runestones. Modern visitors can still hear echoes of this hybrid past in local dialects, where Old Norse loanwords like nyas for prince or grid for courtyard linger like linguistic ghosts. Today, Novgorod's Kremlin walls enclose a living museum of this cultural fusion. At the Yaroslav's Court archaeological site, the outlines of Viking-age workshops emerge beside medieval churches, while reconstructed longships bob in the river, their dragon heads facing east toward the Volga. Every July, the city hosts a medieval festival where reenactors clad in Rus-Varangian garb demonstrate everything from Norse blacksmithing to Slavic embroidery, a vibrant reminder that history isn't about replacement but reinvention. Novgorod didn't just survive its Viking origins, it transformed them into the DNA of a civilization, proving that the most enduring conquests leave not scars but seeds. Waterford's story begins where the River Suir widens into a natural harbor, a place the Norse recognized instantly as the perfect blend of protection and opportunity. When Viking longships first nosed into these waters in 914, they didn't just see another raiding target, they saw a gateway. The name they gave it, Veðrafjörður or Ram Fjord, hints at the rugged landscape that would become both shield and sustenance. Within decades, what started as a scattered collection of turf-walled huts grew into a bustling urban center, its streets laid out with the same grid precision seen in Scandinavian settlements like Hedeby. But Waterford wasn't just a carbon copy of Norse towns back home. It was something new, a hybrid where Viking pragmatism met Irish resilience, where Thor's hammer amulets have been found mere yards from early Christian crosses. The most striking symbol of this fusion still stands sentinel by the waterfront, Reginald's Tower. Built in the 12th century on Viking Age foundations, its circular design mimics Norse fortifications, yet its stonework bears the marks of later Norman masons. Climb its spiral staircase today, and your fingers brush against the same rough-hewn walls where Norse guards once kept watch for rival ships or Irish kings seeking retribution. The tower's name itself is a linguistic palimpsest likely derived from the Norse Ragnall, a common Viking name, later Gaelicized as Ragnall. Inside, artifacts like a Viking-age sword belt mount and a set of finely balanced trade weights whisper of a society that valued both warfare and commerce in equal measure. But Waterford's Norse legacy isn't confined to stone and metal. Wander the so-called Viking Triangle, a compact district linking Reginald's Tower with the medieval museum and Bishop's Palace, and you'll stumble upon traces of everyday Viking life. At the museum, a display of 9th-century silver ingots, each notched with ownership marks, reveals how the Norse introduced standardized currency to Ireland. Nearby, the skeletal remains of a young Norse woman, buried with her glass bead necklace and iron shears, tell a quieter story of migration and adaptation. Forensic analysis shows she grew up eating a diet rich in seafood, a stark contrast to the dairy-heavy fare of her Irish neighbors. What makes Waterford truly extraordinary is how its Viking past refuses to be relegated to textbooks. Every August, the city erupts in a week-long Viking festival where blacksmiths demonstrate pattern welding techniques identical to those used on excavated swords, while reenactors stage mock battles with shields modeled after fragments found in local digs. Even the local brewery gets in on the act, crafting a limited edition Viking ale based on residue analysis from Norse-era drinking horns. This isn't just tourism, it's a living dialogue with the past. The real testament to Waterford's Norse roots, though, lies in its DNA. Recent studies of local surnames like MacAuliffe from Old Norse Olaf and Doyle, dark foreigner, a reference to Danish Vikings, reveal genetic ties stretching back to Scandinavia. The city's layout, too, bears the fingerprints of its founders. The main thoroughfare, Michael Street, follows the exact path of a Viking-age trackway that once connected the docks to the marketplace. From its role as a springboard for Norse incursions into Munster to its eventual transformation under Anglo-Norman rule, Waterford embodies the Viking talent for reinvention. It wasn't just Ireland's first city, it was a crucible where cultures collided and merged, leaving behind a legacy as layered as the strata of artifacts still being unearthed beneath its modern streets. Aarhus wears its Viking origins like a badge of honor, where modern streets curve around the ghostly outline of a 10th-century circular fortress, one of the best preserved in Scandinavia. Walk the paths of what's now called Firkat, and you're tracing the same earthworks where Norse warriors once stood guard, their eyes scanning the horizon for threats. But this wasn't just a military stronghold, it was a carefully planned community. Archaeologists found the remains of 4 longhouses arranged like spokes in a wheel, each one home to warriors, craftsmen, and their families. The discovery of loom weights and spindle walls alongside swords and axes tells a nuanced story. These were settlers, not just soldiers, building lives as fiercely as they defended them. The Mosgard Museum holds Aarhus's most haunting Viking-era relic, the Gråballman, a bog body so impeccably preserved you can still see the stubble on his chin. Though his throat was slit in a ritual sacrifice around the 3rd century, his discovery in 1952 sent shockwaves through Viking studies. The contents of his stomach, a final meal of porridge made from 60 different plants, painted a vivid portrait of Iron Age agriculture. Nearby, glass cases gleam with treasures from Aarhus's Viking heyday, a silver Thor's hammer pendant twisted from melted-down Arabic coins, a ceremonial axe inlaid with intricate knotwork, even a child's leather shoe small enough to fit in your palm. These artifacts don't just sit behind glass, they're woven into immersive exhibits where visitors walk through reconstructed longhouses, the air thick with the scent of smoked fish and damp wool. Every summer, the city's Viking market transforms the riverside into a living tableau of Norse life. Blacksmiths hammer out bracelets using molds identical to those found in Firkat excavations, while cooks simmer stews based on carbonized food remains from archaeological sites. Visitors can barter with reenactors trading amber for honey, or try their hand at carving runes into soapstone, a tactile connection to a time when Aarhus was known as Arrows, or the river mouth. The market's highlight, a reconstructed Viking ship, its hull tarred with pine pitch, bobbing in the harbor just as its ancestors did when Aarhus was a fledgling trading post. What makes Aarhus extraordinary is its layered identity. Beneath the soaring spires of the Gothic cathedral, built from stones quarried where Viking ships once docked, lie the foundations of Denmark's first Christian church, erected in the 10th century by King Harald Bluetooth himself. The city's evolution from pagan garrison to bishop's seat mirrors Denmark's own conversion, a transition etched into the landscape. At the Viking Museum, housed in the basement of a modern bank, glass floors reveal excavated streets where Norse merchants once walked, their footsteps preserved under layers of time. Today, Aarhus embraces its dual legacy with quiet pride. The city's university offers courses in Old Norse, while local breweries craft mead using recipes scratched onto rune stones. Even the urban design nods to its origins. The bustling Latin Quarter follows the same winding paths as the medieval settlement that grew from Viking roots. From fortress to marketplace, pagan outpost to cultural capital, Aarhus proves that the most enduring settlements aren't those that resist change, but those that absorb it, transforming without forgetting the fierce, resourceful spirit of their founders. Wollin rises from the Polish coast like a riddle wrapped in Baltic mist, a place where history and legend blur into one. Some scholars whisper this was Jomsborg, the fabled stronghold of the Vikings, an elite brotherhood of Norse mercenaries whose exploits border on myth. Whether or not the sagas ring true, the soil here speaks volumes. Excavations have yielded Thor's hammer amulets nestled beside Slavic pottery, their coexistence painting a picture far richer than simple conquest. This wasn't just a Viking colony, it was a cultural alloy where Norse traders and Slavic craftsmen bartered, intermarried, and reshaped each other's worlds. The artifacts tell a story of astonishing reach. Arabic silver dirhams, their edges nicked from test cuts, mingle with Byzantine weights and Saxon jewelry in Wollin's earth, proof this was no backwater, but a pivot point in the Baltic trade web. One particularly striking find, a bronze Valkyrie figurine, her wings outstretched, discovered near the remains of a Slavic-style furnace. The fusion is palpable. Norse mythology rendered by hands steeped in Wendish metalworking traditions. At the Wollin National Museum, these objects aren't displayed as relics of separate cultures, but as threads in the same vibrant tapestry. Every August, the Festival of Slavs and Vikings transforms the town into a living diorama of this hybrid past. Thousands of reenactors from Poland, Scandinavia, and beyond gather to recreate 10th-century life with meticulous accuracy. The air fills with the percussive clang of blacksmiths forging pattern-welded swords using ore smelted from local bog iron, a technique verified by slag deposits found nearby. Meanwhile, Slavic weavers demonstrate intricate tablet weaving beside Norse boatbuilders constructing a clinker-built fairing, their collaboration mirroring the very exchanges that defined medieval Wollin. The festival's climax, a simulated battle on the banks of the Sigtuna River, isn't just spectacle. It's a visceral reminder that conflict and cooperation were two sides of the same coin in this borderland. What makes Wollin extraordinary is its refusal to fit neat categories. The settlement's layout defies expectations. Norse-style longhouses stand shoulder to shoulder with Slavic sunken-floor dwellings, their contrasting architectures suggesting mutual adaptation rather than domination. Even dietary habits merged. Analysis of hearth remains reveals Norse-style fish-drying racks positioned beside ovens used for Slavic flatbread. This cultural permeability extended to spirituality. Amulets of Perun, the Slavic thunder god, have been found in graves alongside Mjolnir pendants, hinting at a syncretism that would make later missionaries blanch. Modern Wollin wears this duality with pride. The town's crest features a Viking ship and a Slavic griffin, while local cafes serve Jomsborg mead, brewed from a recipe found in medieval manuscripts. Archaeologists still uncover new surprises, like last year's discovery of a Norse-style ship rivet near a Slavic fishing weir, suggesting shared maritime technologies. From its disputed identity as Jomsborg to its role as a crucible of Baltic exchange, Wollin stands as testament to history's messy, magnificent reality, that the most enduring legacies aren't forged through purity, but through the alchemy of encounter. Here, the Vikings weren't just visitors or overlords, they became part of the pattern, their threads inextricably woven into a tapestry that still hangs, vivid and vital, over Europe's northeastern edge. Trondheim's story begins where the Nidelva River meets the fjord, a strategic bend in the water that caught the eye of Viking King Olaf Tryggvason in the year 997. This wasn't just another settlement, it was a royal statement carved into the landscape, a deliberate power play against Norway's stubborn pagan chiefs. Picture the scene, freshly hewn timbers rising where the king's hall would stand, its long fire sending smoke signals across the Trondheimsfjord, announcing the birth of a Christian monarchy. But beneath this new order pulsed older, darker currents. Just east of the city, the Lade district loomed like a shadow, a pre-Christian power center where earls of Lade once presided over blood sacrifices at the Temple of Thor. The soil here still whispers of that tension, Christian crosses etched into rune stones beside older carvings of serpentine dragons, a visual tug of war between the old gods and the new. At the heart of it all rises Nidaros's cathedral, a Gothic masterpiece built directly over Olaf's grave. Pilgrims once flocked here by the thousands, drawn by tales of miracles wrought by the king who forcibly baptized Norway. But look closer, the cathedral's west front is a stone saga in itself. Amidst the saints and apostles, you'll spot motifs straight from Viking art, interlocking beasts that could have adorned a longship's prow, their sinuous forms repurposed to serve a new faith. Even the coronation throne inside rests atop a slab of soapstone from a nearby Viking Age quarry, a subtle nod to continuity. When modern monarchs still receive their blessings here, they're enacting a ritual that stretches back to the very cusp of the Viking Age's end. What makes Trondheim extraordinary isn't just its monuments, but the living politics under its surface. The Frostething, one of Norway's earliest parliamentary assemblies, met just outside the city at Frosta. Here, free men, many descended from Viking landowners, debated laws under open skies, their traditions echoing the Norse Althing while gradually adopting European legal codes. At the Sverresborg Trøndelag Folk Museum, you can stand on the reconstructed law rock where speakers once stood, their voices carrying across the same fjord that had brought both raiders and reformers to these shores. The exhibits drive home the paradox. A Viking-style carved door from a stave church depicts the Magi alongside Odinic wolves, while a 12th-century chest bears both Christian crosses and runic inscriptions warding off thieves. Today, Trondheim wears its layered identity with pride. Down by the harbor, the reconstructed longship Estjohester rides the waves, a reminder that even after conversion, the Norse never lost their seafaring edge. Up in the Archbishop's Palace Museum, artifacts like the tattered remains of King Olaf's silk shroud mingle with older finds, a smith's tongs from a Viking workshop, their jaws still flecked with iron scale. Even the city's annual Allsock Festival blends medieval hymns with torchlit processions that wouldn't look out of place in a saga. The true genius of Trondheim lies in its refusal to be just one thing. Between the cathedral's spires and the quiet power of Lade's ancient fields, it captures Norway's defining moment not as a sudden break, but as a slow turning where Viking pragmatism met Christian ambition, and a nation was forged in the space between. From the Frostething's democratic echoes to the cathedral's stone saints with wolfish grins, this is where the Norse world didn't end, it evolved. The Isle of Man rises from the Irish Sea like a weathered chessboard, its rolling hills marked with stone pieces from a game played between Celtic and Viking cultures. Nowhere is this fusion more striking than in the island's iconic crosses, towering slabs of carved stone where Norse runes coil around Celtic knotwork, where Odin's ravens perch beside Christian saints. At Kirkmichael, the Gaut's cross stands sentinel after 1,000 years, its sides telling parallel stories. One panel shows a bound wolf from Scandinavian myth, while another depicts the biblical sacrifice of Isaac. These aren't just artworks, they're stone dialogues proving that the Vikings who settled here didn't erase what came before. They conversed with it, blending traditions until the seams vanished. But the island's Norse heartbeat pulses strongest in its government. The Tinwald, meeting continuously since 979, isn't just old, it's a direct descendant of Viking assemblies, where free men gathered on the Law Rock at Tynwald Hill to debate under open skies. The rituals endure. Each July, laws are still proclaimed there in both English and Manx Gaelic, a language peppered with Old Norse words like skeel for story or liaby for bed. This isn't ceremonial theatre, it's governance as living archaeology where parliamentary procedure unfolds with Viking-era pageantry. The very name Tynwald comes from the Old Norse Thingvaller, meaning assembly field, a term echoing across the Atlantic to Iceland's Althing and Norway's Gulating. Step inside the House of Mannanen Museum, and you'll face the ghost of a longship, a full-scale replica of the Knock-Wy Dooney vessel, its hull built from local oak using tools identical to those found in Viking graves on the island. Nearby, silver hoards glitter under glass, their coins stamped with names like Sitrick and Olaf, rulers of Dublin's Norse kingdom. One particularly poignant display holds a tiny pair of bronze scales, delicate enough to fit in a palm, the tool of a trader who weighed silver fragments against barley grains in a system of exchange so trusted, it bound together ports from Bergen to Byzantium. What makes the Isle of Man unique isn't just its artifacts, but their stubborn vitality. At Peel Castle, excavations revealed a 10th-century Norse woman buried with her belongings, a comb from Norway, a spindle whorl from Scotland, and a tiny bell possibly traded from Ireland. Her grave sits atop an earlier Celtic chapel, layers of belief and belonging compressed into a single hillside. Today, fishermen in Peel still mend nets using techniques recorded in Norse sagas, while up in the glens, farmers cut turf from the same patches their Viking ancestors did, the peat-preserving oak posts from their longhouses. The island's real magic lies in its linguistic DNA. Manx Gaelic, once nearly extinct, now thrives in revival, and with it, phrases like Mogri mai good morning that share roots with Old Norse Garthan Morgen. Place names map Viking footsteps: Sneefell, Snow Mountain, Laxey, Salmon River, even the capital Douglas derived from the Norse dub ghlys for dark stream. This isn't a dead language in textbooks. It's a living bridge where Norse settlers' words for tides, fish, and weather patterns still cling to the tongues of schoolchildren singing in Manx choirs. From its hybrid crosses to its unbroken parliament, the Isle of Man embodies a truth too often forgotten, that the Viking Age wasn't about conquest alone, but about the slow, patient work of knitting cultures into something new. Here, the past isn't behind glass, it's in the cadence of a debate at Tynwald, the curve of a fisherman's knife, the way mist rolls over Sneefell, just as it did when Norse navigators first steered by its silhouette. The island doesn't preserve history, it breathes it, proving that the most enduring settlements aren't those that resist change, but those that make room for every layer of their story. From Dublin's cobbled streets to Canada's windswept shores, these 20 settlements shatter the myth of Vikings as mere raiders. They were architects of the medieval world, weaving trade routes like threads across continents and stitching together cultures with a pragmatism that still resonates today. Think about it. In an age without satellites or steam engines, they turned places like Hedeby into a medieval Wall Street, where Arab silver met Frankish swords, and Copang proved commerce could flourish even without walls. Their legacy isn't just buried in soil, it's etched into our maps, our languages, even our laws. Every time an Icelandic child reads a saga in Old Norse, or a Faroese fisherman navigates by currents his ancestors charted, the Viking Age breathes again. What's most astonishing isn't the scale of their reach, though spanning from Constantinople to Newfoundland is staggering, but the intimacy of their impact. In York, you can buy lunch on a street laid out by Norse town planners, then sip mead from a recipe scratched onto a rune stone. In Novgorod, Slavic and Norse traditions fused so completely that Russia's first ruling dynasty bore a Viking name. Even the humble soapstone pot, a Viking kitchen staple, became a medieval essential across Europe, its durability making it the Tupperware of its day. These weren't just settlers, they were tastemakers, innovators, and sometimes reluctant diplomats. The real lesson: adaptation. The Vikings didn't conquer and vanish, they absorbed and evolved. In Orkney, they adopted Pictish motifs for their carvings. In Waterford, they minted coins with Irish kings. And in places like Sigtuna, they embraced Christianity without erasing their pagan past, leaving runestones that honor Christ in art styles Odin would recognize. Their greatest weapon wasn't the axe, it was flexibility, a knack for blending into new landscapes while leaving indelible marks. So as you scroll through comments sharing your favorite settlement, maybe the cosmopolitan buzz of Birka or the frontier spirit of Elant's Ox Meadows, remember this: Viking history isn't a closed book. It's a conversation. Every archaeological dig, every DNA study, even your curiosity today, adds another line to the saga. Hit subscribe to join us for the next chapter, where we'll unpack how Viking women ran empires from their longhouses, or how their navigation tricks rival modern GPS. Until then, keep exploring. Who knows, the next Viking relic might be under your